Hello mate, and welcome to another amazing pixel art tutorial / creation video, whatever you want to call it. So in this video I'm going to create a bed. So previously we talked about perspective and kind of dimensions, and our character in this imaginary game is in a 16 by 32 square. Now beds, generally speaking, are roughly the same height as the person who sleeps on them. So we're going to essentially fill this frame with our bed. Now it's going to appear to be a little bit shorter than the character because we have to include the legs and the head of the bed. But, you know, we can get away with it to a certain extent. So the first thing we need to do is obviously pick a colour. So I'm going to start off with the frame. So I'm just going to grab this brown colour and I'm just going to map out the size of our bed. So I'm going to almost fill up the entire width. Going to leave a bit of room for a shadow and a little bit of a room for expansion. So I'm basically going to go for that being the width of my bed to start with. And it might look a bit long and narrow now, but we'll kind of get to that in a bit. So that's the colour that our bed frame is going to be. And we have to remember that we're going to map out a portion of this is going to be the pillow and the duvet. And the majority of this head of the bed is actually going to be obscured. So let's just grab some separate colours and we'll just map out the area that the duvet is going to occupy. And then we can start painting over it. Now beds, generally speaking, are not super high. So I wouldn't imagine that a bed's going to be anything more than 50 centimeters tall in a computer game kind of environment. So we're just going to grab that like that. And so that is going to be the length of the mattress and duvet, and now we can obviously take a portion of that and turn that into a pillow that looks a bit like that. So now we can see the shape starting to come together. Now we can start throwing in some detail. The first thing I want to do is add some more shape to the head of our bed. Now I'm thinking we can possibly go something like that. Let's just have a look about that from a distance. That doesn't look too bad. The issue we are going to have though is that we can't mirror that at the top because we haven't left ourselves enough space. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just grab maybe something like this. Let's just see how that looks. See how it looks with just that. And keep it really basic. That looks okay. What that does just mean then that all we have to do is remove that from there, and then that just draws the eye to the fact that there are several of these little posts in the corner of the bed, the head of the bed and the foot of the bed. I mean, if you wanted to, you could just have no foot of the bed at all and just have it like a divan bed, which has obviously nothing at the foot, and that would be a more modern way of doing it for sure, because these kind of four-poster beds tend not to be quite as common these days, in which case we can just get away with going a bit lower down. And then obviously we have to grab some of this colour again and then mark out where the mattress is going to be. We could actually get away with going the full distance there and then grabbing that like so, maybe even extending the mattress or the duvet out from the sides of the bed. Let's just grab that tool and we can go with that and go with that and then see how that looks. And that does give us the illusion that the duvet is hanging over the edges of the bed, and then I think maybe if we're going to do that we might need to widen that out and then just kind of mark the shape of this out with a bit of shading perhaps. It really depends on how you want to do it. It's entirely up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our original shape. Yep, and then remember to delete these bits from the sides for now. Coming back to our original bed shape, there we go. Now, I've gone too far, so I'm going to fix that by just shaving that bit off there like that. keep tweaking it until we're happy with the height. I think we're back where we started from now. Okay, so now we need to start thinking about adding details. So the first thing we're going to do is going to add a little bit of a highlight and shadow to the bed posts. So we've got our main color selected. I'm going to brighten it up, bring that down, and then come towards yellow so that gives me a highlight for the top of my bed posts. And then we've got this section at the top here, which is also supposedly in highlight, but I'm actually going to bring my opacity down and do this in multiple passes because I want to give the illusion now that this is a shiny surface. So like that, and then the same kind of business at this end, but it doesn't have to be in the same place. There we go. So we've given some three-dimensional detail to our bed head and the foot of our bed. And we could add some shadows in there as well if we wanted to. So grab that color again, just come in a little bit. If I'm going to go a little bit more, bring up the saturation and come towards the blue color. Right now we can add just kind of maybe like a little slot in our bed here. And again, I'm going to bring the opacity down so that it gives me multiple options to play with. So I'm going to draw that across there. And then just do something like that. And then that gives us the illusion of a slot in the bed. Now I'm actually going to delete some of the material here so that we actually look like we've got legs on our bed rather than it just dropping straight to the floor. And then we can add some shadow in a bit later on as we see fit. Okay, so next thing I want to do is just come with my highlight color again and just drop a shadow, sorry. To do a shadow, so we'll Control Z that. We'll just bring that in there just to kind of give us a bit more of a third dimension where it meets the bed head there. But now I need to do largely the same thing but with the pillow. So drag my pillow color down, come up with the saturation a little bit, bring the opacity down, and just going to add corner shadow there, because pillows are very rarely uniform in shape, so we're just going to go something like that. That just adds some there, and then we can add some more highlights. Now what I need to do is come way down on the opacity, way down on the opacity, and then just add a kind of a shadow under the pillow there, something like that, and that just gives us the illusion of something more interesting happening. Right, now this is a bit square, so we can round off a couple of the corners if we want to. So I'm going to gradually grab my shadow color there and I'm going to just pull in that side and maybe that corner. Again, just gives me some illusion, and at the moment it looks very much like our pillow is just kind of floating in the air. So we do need to rectify that, so I'm going to grab this color again. And that gives me a highlight. I'm going to pull back on the opacity a bit just to darken that color a smidge, and now we can add a little bit of highlight to the top, maybe a crease down the middle or something like that. Just literally just messing around until we're happy with the way our pillow looks. And if I think perhaps that is a bit too bright, because this is cotton, it's not a shiny material, we can just again get the natural color, pull the opacity down, paint over all of our shadows and highlights just to make them a little bit more subtle, and then that gives us a bit more of a feeling of the 3 dimensions. But again, if I'm still not happy with this, what I can do is I can grab my base color, bring down the opacity, make it darker, bring down the opacity again, and then I can just grab that. And I think I might be a little bit too light here because that is going to be really subtle, so let's grab that again. Until we can actually see the color, we need to be able to see it, otherwise we're not really going to be achieving very much. I feel like that's maybe where we need to be. And that just adds a bit of 3 dimension to that pillow. Cool beans. Okay, now we've got to tackle the duvet. Now the duvet is not a flat surface, it's rounded on the corners, which means we now need to add a darker color to our edges, and luckily we've already got a darker brush selected, so I'm going to just drag that down there and drag that down there, and already we can see that there is a kind of a three-dimensional shift in the way it looks. But I'm actually going to doubly round off this corner, so I'm going to go there and there, and then I'm actually going to come over the edge one more time again, just to soften that corner a little bit, and that looks a little bit better. And we can even do the exact opposite if we come up to a really bright color. Again, we need to keep the opacity fairly low, and I'm actually going to select out a section in the middle that's a bit too bright, so we can pull back on the opacity. That's more like it. Drag out a section there, and then drag out a section again, and then that again just gives us that three-dimensional feeling. Now that we've done that, realistically the only thing we need to do is just add a couple of creases, or at least hint at the creases. So we're going to come back to our dark color. I'm just going to pull the opacity up a smidge there, and I'm just going to draw in some shapes that kind of indicate that the duvet isn't perfectly flat, that there are some creases. Maybe you could have one crease that kind of tracks across almost the entire bed. Something like that perhaps. And now that we've got those colours painted on, we can actually just select them and go with that style. Okay, so we're getting into the region where we're starting to see some detail now. Because this is pixel art and we do have a limited amount of space, we essentially what we need to do is we need to sell the image to the person looking at it. This needs to look like a bed. They need to be able to recognize it as a bed, but then it needs to not be so attention grabbing that it kind of distracts them from it. Now what we've got is we've got this crease going across here, but at the moment it's just a black line. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to grab a really white color with a really low opacity. Make sure I've got my pen tool selected, and I'm actually going to hint at the presence of a third dimension. I think that's too bright. So come right back on the opacity a little bit more. Again, remember this is not a shiny material, so the specularity is going to be limited, and that just adds a bit of a third dimension to it. But for example, I'm looking at the pillow and I'm thinking, does this look like a pillow? Do I need to do some more work here to sell it as a pillow? I'm thinking kind of maybe. So I'm just going to pull up on that color a little bit. Don't want it to be too bright, and I don't really want, there we go, I don't want my opposite corners to be identical. I could realistically get away with going something like that on the edge there, and something like that on the edge there. Again, we're just playing around with the shapes until we get what we're after. Something like that. That looks fine. I'm quite happy with that overall. It gives the illusion of it being rounded. If we wanted to, we could maybe add a little bit more shape to the bottom, but I'm not gonna stop over engineering it, because otherwise we'll just end up straying very far from where we started. The last thing I really want to do is add some shadows underneath the bed. So I'm going to grab my black color, come down on the opacity a little bit, and remember we've got our contact shadows, which are going to go there and there, and then there and there, and then I'm going to grab my square tool, my rectangle tool, and just do a double kind of effect there, and then that gives us our overall finished bed. So I'm pretty happy with that. It could be a lot worse. You could go wider if you wanted to. We could afford to go one wider because our contact shadow is not going to be impacted by it. And I'll leave that decision up to you if that's what you want to do with it or not. So thanks very much for watching that, guys. Hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, you take damn good care of yourselves, alright? Bye-bye.